With Holy Cross tonight, number 2 UConn will be tinkering with something Geno rarely utilizes. Depth. You're locked on UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. This podcast has grown exponentially, and it's because of fans like you who value great UConn content. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering both the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, in the basketball capital of the world for sure. We're thrilled to hang with you and give you the coverage that you deserve. And to show our gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to the Husky Ticket Project right here, as my shirt says, helping send kids to UConn basketball games, both the men's and women's. And we're also making monthly donations to Bleeding Blue for Good, supporting UConn's NIL initiatives that make a difference for our athletes. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. A special shout out to my everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, so Holy Cross tonight. It's essentially a night for experimentation because this upcoming matchup against the Crusaders is a game that is not going to look like much on paper, but it carries significant importance as the Huskies fine-tune their game ahead of a grueling December stretch, without a doubt. We've called it a gauntlet before. It's grueling, however you want, whatever adjectives you wanted to describe. It's going to be a rough slate for the UConn women. This game marks the return to UConn to Gamble Pavilion after 2 dominant wins last week at the Baha Mar Women's Championships. The Huskies showed why they were ranked number 2 in the country and potentially could be number 1 with standout performances from Paige Bueckers and Azzi Fudd. Bueckers reminded everyone why she's one of the best in the game, scoring 29 points in a 73-60 victory over Ole Miss. Azzi, in her best performance since returning from a season-ending knee injury, added 18 points on an efficient 8 for 11 shooting. The Huskies' defense was relentless throughout the tournament, holding Ole Miss to just 5 of 32 shooting in the first half and using that endurance to apply pressure for a full 40 minutes. Against Oregon State, UConn's bigs, led by Jana El Alfy, stepped up to dominate inside. The freshman center displayed poise and physicality against OSU's 6'7" center, showing why she's one of the best and most exciting young players on their roster. Holy Cross won't provide that same physical matchup. With only 2 players over 6 foot tall and one of them absent for the last 2 games, the Crusaders lack the size to challenge UConn inside easily. It just won't be possible. This gives Geno Auriemma an excellent opportunity to experiment with rotations and give some younger players extended minutes. So, in a interesting way, this will be something that Geno is not super keen on doing, which is not necessarily experimenting with lineups, but just using a lot of players. He typically is resistant to 5, 6, 7, 8 players deep, but now it's almost imperative that he does this because you want these kids to get the opportunity to play against teams that they should beat, and also to experiment what it's like to be on this winning culture outside of just, practicing, right? So Holy Cross, totally in a transition year, led by interim head coach Candace Green. Despite their Patriot League tournament wins in 23 and 24, they're projected to finish 6th in the conference this year. The Crusaders lost most of their key contributors from last year, returning just 1 starter, junior guard Caitlin Flanagan. New additions include Kendall Eddy, and a Providence transfer who brings experience but modest production to the roster. So far this season, Holy Cross has been relatively inconsistent, is a nice way to say they've been brutal. They lost to Quinnipiac, Boston College, Vermont. A decent win over UMass. It also comes into this game boasting their best road start since 96-97. But, I wouldn't expect this to be relatively competitive. For UConn, this game is less about the scoreboard and more about preparation. Azzi Fudd potentially returning to the starting lineup. We'll talk about that in the next segment. After her performance in the Bahamas, we'll see how Geno adjusts the rotations. If Fudd starts, Ashlynn Shade moves to the first bench rotation, joining KK Arnold and Jana El Alfy to form what Geno's calling a second unit that could start for many teams. I agree with that 100%. This depth is just a luxury, again, that UConn has not been afforded, but also a luxury that Geno doesn't typically use. So I think he's just starting to see the light that this team is actually really talented, and he can't just rely on Paige Bueckers to carry the load all year. So expect some experiments tonight. Expect the same cohesion, but there also could be more turnovers because of that. So if they're a little sloppy tonight, it might be because the things get out of hand and they decide to kind of tweak things a little bit. So especially with this brutal stretch of ranked opponents that's coming up. So it's number 2 UConn 6-0 versus Holy Cross 4-3 on the year. It's tonight at 7:00. It's in Gamble on TV on SNY. If you don't want to have it on TV, you can put it on your Fox Sports app. Yeah, so UConn, again, if it's 6-0 UConn versus Holy Cross, who's 4-3. It's tonight, 7:00, Gamble Pavilion. SNY is the TV station. If you don't get that, you can watch it on your Fox Sports app or listen to it on a UConn Sports Network on the app there. SiriusXM Radio is where else you can follow it. They're not expected to challenge UConn, obviously, but this game is, just a nice little tune-up before Louisville, before Notre Dame, before Iowa State, before USC on the horizon. A lot of big games coming. But before we move on, let's talk about Paige and her incredible gesture to her teammates. In typical Paige fashion, she made a incredible groundbreaking opportunity for her. Her new signature shoe came out there. I think they're beautiful. Nike GT Hustle PE was a celebration, but it was a celebration not just about her, but of team unity. Rather than just debuting her new player edition shoes, becoming the first NIL athlete to release one, Paige went above and beyond to include her teammates in the moment. In a video now shared throughout the globe, she essentially made custom gift buckets, that's her name, inside her signature shoes, along with Nike and Bueckers branded merchandise. But it wasn't just any packaging. There were gift bags and boxes. These were actual purple and black buckets, a clever nod to her iconic name, Paige Buckets. The reaction from her teammates were priceless. There were shouts on the video, "Oh my gosh, Paige! Oh my God, you got to check it out." It was super cool. I think people were genuinely thrilled and excited about how thoughtful it was. I think it was personalized. It's a perfect example of what makes Paige special. She has an ability to shine individually, but she always kind of pushes that away and makes the others around her very excited. So it's gestures like that just really show that leadership. She really didn't just take the moment for herself. She shared it with her entire team. I'd be surprised if I would see Geno rocking a Paige Bueckers hoodie that she has. So the interesting part about the shoe that I love is the I think it's 617 to 860 is the brand in terms of like that's where she's from, Minnesota to now obviously stores. 860 obviously an area code. So I just think it's a really cool show. I honestly will be shocked if they don't sell out quickly. I would love to cop a pair. So Paige, if you're listening, you can definitely send one to Locked On UConn. I'm size 10.5, or I can do an 11. So yes, when we return, is Azzi Fudd about to crack that starting lineup? We'll talk about it. What's up, everybody? Let me tell you about my friends at Game Time. There is no feeling like going to a live sporting event. The sound of the sneakers squeaking on the court, the pure adrenaline rush when your favorite team hits shots at the buzzer, whether it's spotting celebrities at courtside or just former players, hearing the roar of fans, or simply being a part of the action, live sports are an experience you can't replicate at home. It's not just sports, concerts, comedy shows, musicals, theater performances. It's all better live. Now, let me tell you about the Game Time app, where their new Game Time Picks feature, which takes all the hassle out of finding tickets. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you the best deals on great seats so you can focus on the fun, not the search. I used Game Time recently for a friend of mine. They got a super deal along with it, helped them lock in some amazing seats at a fraction of the price for a football game locally. Plus, the app shows you exactly what you see, view from your seats. You can buy with no surprises, just confidence in your purchase, all in pricing, no hidden fees. And on top of that, they have what's called the lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets for less, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. That's the kind of peace of mind that makes this app a must-have. So what time is it, guys? It's game time. All right. Let's stay on the Azzi Fudd storyline for a moment because her return is one of the most significant developments of UConn season so far. We talked about this a while back with Emily Adams about how adding her whenever it was, I didn't think it was going to be this early. I think we started talking about potentially January, February. It would be like the WNBA, like if the Lynx added a Diana Taurasi in her prime. To add to an already fantastic team. So adding a top 5 talent in college basketball to a already loaded roster is almost unfair. But we're excited about it because she's for us. Obviously, it's been a long road back for Azzi. She's battled through an ACL and a meniscus tear. But in just 3 games, she's shown why she's one of the, obviously, we just talked about it, the most dangerous players in college basketball. Easily the Robin to Paige's Backman. Her 18-point performance against Ole Miss wasn't just a great performance. It was kind of a statement. It was kind of a rubber stamp that I'm back. Fudd looked confident, efficient, ready to lead, ready to be a part of something. Geno noted that she's still working her way back into full game shape, which is scary for everybody, but that her minutes have been steadily increasing. And she played a season-high 27 minutes in the win over Ole Miss. That's encouraging more than itself. Whether she could have had 0 points, but as long as she's playing steady minutes and it's going to keep going up, fantastic. What's exciting is how her return impacts the entire team. Ashlynn Shade said it best. We're all just so happy for her. As an underclassman, I want to watch her and learn from her. And that's the kind of team-first mentality that makes this group so special. And it's not just Shade who benefits. KK Arnold, Jana El Alfy, both key contributors off the bench. And will have more freedom to focus on their roles without being thrust into high-pressure starting situations. And let's face it, it's not who starts, it's who finishes games. So if there are games where KK's cooking or Ashlynn's really, drilling a bunch of threes, they'll play. Not to say that they'll sit Azzi for them, but if something happens, like Azzi was 8 of 11 in that Ole Miss game, if she was 1 of 11, she probably doesn't play 27 minutes. She probably plays 20. But she was feeling good. She was really cooking, and you gotta ride the hot hand. So, look, Geno pointed out that this depth gives UConn luxury. We've talked about this. They haven't had in a very long time that he's potentially going to start using on a regular basis against not only just the Holy Crosses of the world, but some of the top 25 that we're going to talk about in the next segment. So as Azzi continues her comeback, it's not just about her individual performance. It's about how her presence is elevating all the team and everyone around her. And it's going to set the stage for what could be a truly special season if everything falls in line. And if God willing, they stay healthy. So when we return, we're going to talk through how UConn is holding on to the number 2 AP ranking. Probably should have been number 1. I didn't agree with UCLA jumping everybody to 1, even though they beat South Carolina. So let's talk about that right after the break. Get ready to tackle the NFL with FanDuel, America's number 1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the live stats, view play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, guys. The December gauntlet definitely looms, and UConn holds on to the number 2 spot in the latest AP poll. But let's kind of zoom out, bigger picture. For the 5th straight week, UConn is at number 2, holding strong. We got 7 first-place votes, second only to UCLA, who sits at number 1 with 25. It's not a very strong issue, but I definitely have an issue with UCLA going from 5 to 1 and leapfrogging teams. That's typically not how it's done. But kudos to the AP voters. They felt like UCLA's thrashing of South Carolina really deserved to jump UConn. People have said, well, they haven't played anybody. Well, they beat 15th ranked North Carolina and they beat 18th ranked Ole Miss. It's not like they're, beating every team Holy Cross by, 100 points. It's, they've had one on the road, one on a neutral site because North Carolina was on the road. And even though it was in Greensboro and not in Chapel Hill. But, I guess what's keeping the UConn ranking so high starts with performances like the one they just had against Ole Miss, right? And even though Oregon State isn't exactly, lighting people on fire here, it's still a high major win. So Paige has obviously been incredible. 26 points on 66% shooting. Stupid. 55% from three. These numbers earn her the Evergreen Award of Big East Player of the Week, which I'm sure is going to happen on more and more and more. There's a second time this season. The real test begins after Holy Cross. We have this brutal stretch, number 22 Louisville, this Saturday at the Women's Classic Championship in Brooklyn. From there, it's a road trip to South Bend to face number 10 Notre Dame, who was number 3 and lost. I kind of wanted them to hold at 3, but it's still going to be a tough game with Hannah Hidalgo and folks. Followed up by a matchup with number 20 Iowa State, another team that's going to drop in the polls. It's crazy. Like when you start looking at these numbers, like we were earlier, the teams were ranked a lot higher, and they start playing decent teams. Like we talked about yesterday about how much more depth there is in women's college basketball, and now we're looking at the actual results of that. And so they play on Iowa State at Mohegan Sun. I'm sure that's going to be really fun for folks in Connecticut to go to the casino and then maybe see the game if you're staying. Have a good time with that. And let's not forget, sold out showdown against number 6 USC on December 21st, right before Christmas. A rematch of last year's Elite Eight game, pitting Juju Watkins versus Paige Beckers. That will be a dynamite performance for UConn versus USC. I think Paige is definitely up for the challenge. So the stretch is critical, not just for UConn's rankings, but for their NCAA tournament resume. The importance of quad 1 wins, net rankings, that can kind of give them higher seeding. You don't want them to stumble and get a 2 seed because the Big East is terrible, and you're already thinking about how to maximize the team's potential during this gauntlet. So, and what makes this stretch so intriguing is that it's not just about winning games; it's about seeing how this team handles adversity. If they get down, how do we go from there? If a team does what North Carolina does and goes to a matchup zone, do they adjust? Azzi's back in the fold. How does that affect the rotations? Paige playing at a super elite level. How does that trickle down? Jana is coming around. Ice is playing solid. Do we get an Aubrey Griffin back? Do we get a little more playing time depending on who's the hot hand, whether it's KK, whether it's Caitlin Chen. And if you notice with Azzi back, you're not seeing a ton of Caitlin Chen, or us. We're not talking about her as much because some of that air is being swallowed up. And I think that just makes them even deeper because Caitlin is super capable of being a running mate with Paige. Azzi's just that much more talented. And if she's healthy, then that kind of supplants Caitlin's role as the sidekick. But she can definitely be that third scorer. I can tell you that. So the AP Top 25, if you didn't see it, UCLA is 1, UConn 2. They were the only teams getting first place votes, and South Carolina's at 3. Texas is 7-0 at number 4. LSU is at 5. USC's at 6. Maryland's at 7. Duke is at 8. TCU at 9. That's an intriguing team. Number 10, Notre Dame. They've lost 2 of the last 4. Oklahoma 6-1 at 11. Ohio State, number 12. Kansas State at 13. Kentucky at 14. West Virginia at 15. North Carolina staying strong at 16. I think they're a good team. They're going to get better. 17, Iowa. Ole Miss 5-2 at 18. Alabama undefeated at 19. Iowa State. Illinois. Rounding off the top 25 is Louisville, who we play. Michigan, Michigan State, and Nebraska. Some notable movements include TCU achieving the highest ever ranking at number 9 of their program's career after significant wins over Notre Dame, which dropped to number 10 following recent losses. Additionally, Duke climbed to number 8 after impressive victories, marking its highest position since 2014. The Big Ten Conference leads with 9 teams in the poll, followed by the SEC with 7. Do you see why I want UConn as a whole, as an athletic department, to leave the Big East? because we're it. There's other Big East teams in there. There's former Big East teams. So there you have it. Game against Holy Cross to experiment. Azzi Fudd's inspiring return to the starting lineup in the December gauntlet that will test everything this team is made of. The Huskies have the talent, the depth, and the leadership to rise to the occasion. Now it's time to see if they can deliver. I bet they can. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow with more insights, analysis, and everything you need to know about UConn women's basketball. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day, and it's our goal every day here at Locked On, and it's the goal of the Huskies. Guess what? Go Huskies. Get that dub tonight.